One of the best ways to gauge the success of a firearm's design is to look at its service history. It isn't uncommon for many designs to be obsolete before the first time they've been fielded, much less survive the trial by fire of not one, but several wars. And not just wars, but world wars. Sometimes even the cartridge a fighting rifle is chambered in can fade into obscurity in just the span of a decade or two. This is not the case for the M9130, or Mosin Nagant rifle as it is most commonly known by. If you had to assign human characteristics to a rifle, it would not be unfair to say that the Mosin is tenacious, steadfast, hardy, and maybe even stubborn. From the bloody wars during the reign of Imperial Russia to insurgency warfare during the global war on terror, if a Mosin rifle could speak, it would have countless war stories to tell. The Mosin rifle's history began in the late 1800s when the world was fractured by powerful empires. During this time, small and major wars were fought all around the globe as these empires battled over territories and their people as if they were livestock that could be bought, sold, traded, or stolen. With war comes innovation, as the brightest minds and inventors chase lucrative government acquisition contracts for new weapons that distribute death faster, cheaper, and more efficiently. At the forefront of this innovation was a relatively new projectile propellant that burned extremely fast and with less residue, smokeless powder. And new rifles were finding their way to the front lines. Repeating rifles. These new rifles featured internal magazines that could typically hold 5 or more cartridges, increasing the rate of fire and effectiveness for any soldier that wielded them. And this was the case during the Russo-Turkish War of 1877. The Russian coalition was eventually successful during this campaign, but suffered heavy losses against the Turks, who were armed with Winchester repeating rifles, while the Russians only had single-shot Berdan rifles. Because of this, a committee was formed to modernize the Russian service rifle to meet the standards of other world powers of the time, to either adapt Berdan rifles to be fired from a magazine, or adopt a new rifle entirely that used smokeless powder and also fired from a magazine. Eventually, the design of Sergei Ivanovich Mosin was accepted with some alterations and went on to become the M1891, chambered in the 7.62 x 54mm R cartridge. It is a common misconception that the R in the caliber designation stands for Russian, when in fact it stands for rimmed, meaning that the base of the cartridge features a full rim, much like a revolver cartridge. This rim can cause interruptions in feeding, when one rim overlaps another in the magazine, causing rim lock. But the large rim also offers a large surface for an extractor to grab hold of, or as some like to say, rimmed, for the extractor's pleasure. Mosin's rifle was adopted by the Russian military, and it wouldn't be long before its design would be tested by combat. In 1904, the Russo-Japanese War broke out, and by that time, 3.8 million of the rifles had been produced. But the Mosin's real trial by fire would be World War I. During these conflicts, Russia would experience small victories and major defeats, but this was not a reflection of the Mosin rifle itself, but rather the political and social instabilities at the time. After the 1917 Russian Revolution, and before World War II, the Mosin was modernized into the rifle most commonly seen today, the M9130. This modernized rifle had its barrel shortened slightly, and the sights were converted from the obscure Arshin unit of measurement to meters. At the start of World War II, the Mosin was the standard issue rifle for the largest mobilized military force in history, and as the war progressed, more and more of these rifles were needed as the Soviet Union began to conscript large swaths of the population to fight in the meat grinder that was the Eastern Front. Over the course of the war, production was simplified as much as possible, and late war Mosin rifles are easily identifiable by their rough tool marks and overall poorer standard of manufacture. But what the Mosin lacks in refinement or elegance, it makes up for in durability. Mosin rifles proved to be extremely hardy and able to withstand humid summers and bitterly cold winters. The Mosin rifle was one of the first firearm designs in the 20th century that truly expressed the Russian philosophy of small arms. No frills, sometimes even considered crude in design, but absolutely rugged and able to be produced by the tens of millions to equip a massive military. During World War II, the Soviets were some of the quickest to realize the tactical advantage of snipers, and so select Mosin rifles that met minimum accuracy requirements were outfitted with fixed 3.5 power PU rifle scopes and given to specially trained snipers. In addition to scope modifications, rifles were fitted with bolts that had their typically straight bolt handle turned downward to accommodate the scope over the rifle's receiver. From this program, legends were born, such as Vasily Zaitsev, but also Lyudmila Pavlichenko, a deadly female sniper credited to 309 confirmed kills with her PU-equipped Mosin rifle, nicknamed the Lady Death. The success of Soviet snipers during World War II helped to cement the concept of marksmanship in Soviet and post-Soviet military doctrine. Production of the Mosin ceased after World War II, but by this point, tens of millions of rifles had been produced. Mosins would continue to be used in conflicts around the globe, including the Korean War, Vietnam War, and are still in the hands of both liberators and terrorists alike in war zones around the world. Its cartridge, the 7.62 by 54mm rimmed, is still in service with the Russian military, and it is one of the longest serving cartridges in history, owing its long service life to its hard-hitting and reliable performance. The Mosin has been extremely popular in civilian markets, as they were extremely cheap and sold as military surplus to collectors. This may come as no surprise, but the Mosin Nagant is rendered superbly in Escape from Tarkov. As always, I look for small details that show me that the gun makers and animators in Tarkov truly understand how these rifles function, and with the Mosin, there's a few key points that stand out to me. When you wish to top off the Mosin, when rounds are still in the gun, the round in the chamber is ejected and falls to the ground. This is a highly realistic way of depicting this process, as any time the bolt is retracted with a round in the chamber, the natural function of the rifle is to eject that round. Next, I'm impressed with the variety of how the Mosin is represented in-game. You can configure the Mosin in many ways, including a shortened version most similar to an M91 59, a pistol version much like an Obrez, or you can modernize it with synthetic stocks or even the over-the-top Archangel stock system. I've seen many sporterized Mosins in my day, so seeing these builds in-game always gives me a chuckle. Another interesting point is how the Mosin can be represented when playing as a scav. Sometimes your Mosin will be missing its front sight, something that was not too uncommon to see when buying military surplus rifles. If I had to critique the rifle in game, I'd like to see two things. First, the bolt operation in game is only realistic under absolutely ideal circumstances. In most cases, the bolt action of a real Mosin can feel grindy, clunky, and as if you need to fight the bolt to seat the round completely. Sometimes it's smooth, and sometimes you need to find yourself smacking the bolt closed. It would be nice to see these animations tweaked slightly to show how difficult it can be to tame this old warhorse. Second, I'd love to see stripper clips added to the game for the infantry version. If you run completely dry, it would be great to be able to quickly load all 5 rounds on a stripper clip, and that shouldn't be too hard to find in Tarkov with everything else that's laying around. But overall, the Mosin is beautifully done, and the nicks and scratches on the wood and the tool marks on the steel make it look so true to life that I can overlook these minor details. When it comes to outfitting the Mosin, it depends on what you're trying to do with it. The 7N1 cartridge is extremely powerful and can often one-shot to the thorax even with some armor on. So as long as you make your shots count, the rifle will serve you well. Although the expensive modifications can be fun to mess around with, I typically don't even bother with it, and the most I'll ever equip a Mosin with is a suppressor and its original PU optic. This optic has a very limited field of vision and can be very difficult to use, but the alternative is using the tri-rail mount, which replaces the rear iron sight. Because of the extremely long eye relief, very few scopes in the game work well while using this setup, with the best maybe being the Valde 1:6 power. So beware before heading out with high-end scope setups to avoid being disappointed the first time you ADS. The Mosin also has pretty bad base ergonomics, with costly upgrades not really helping all that much. I find that the Mosin excels in 2 areas: prone sniping and running and gunning. A full-length or Obrez Mosin can be great for getting close-range bolt-action kills due to its hard-hitting cartridge, but quick scoping or holding an angle while aiming down sights for long periods of time can be difficult. If you want to run and gun, take quick peeks, then immediately duck back into cover while you rack the bolt for the most success. Like many Russian firearms designs, what the Mosin lacks in sleek refinement, it makes up for in ease of use and raw durability. And because of this, the Model 1891 rifle will most likely continue to be seen in conflicts around the world for possibly even another century. And it will also remain in the hands of sports shooters and collectors for as long as they can keep them oiled and in good repair. It makes perfect sense that Mosin's rifle found its way into Tarkov, and as newer designs come along and the passing of time threatens to rust its steel and rot away its stocks, there's one thing for certain. Just like German generals during the siege of Stalingrad, when you're in Tarkov, never underestimate a trapped and surrounded Russian who's got nothing but his Mosin rifle and the desire to live another day. Thank you for watching this episode of Gun Factor. I hope you enjoyed it. I know bolt actions are less interesting than assault rifles and tricked out SMGs, but hopefully this video gives you all a little context and history for a legendary rifle that saw millions of soldiers through many brutal wars. There's still a ton of guns in Tarkov that I can do a Gun Factor episode on, so let me know in the comments which one you'd like me to cover next. If you check out my Twitch stream, you can earn channel points just for watching or being active in the chat. If you earn 1,111 points, you can select any of the guns that I own, and I'll show it to you live, explaining what I know about it and sometimes even taking them apart for you. And I do own a Mosin if you'd like to see it. It's a very early hex receiver version. Drop by the stream and I can explain exactly what that means. A link is in the description. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll have a new video soon. But until then, I'm Jeff with EUL Gaming. Good luck out there.